Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hurd in the House podcast. I'm Congressman Jeff Hurd, proud to represent Colorado's 3rd Congressional District, and I am very happy to have a wonderful guest here for this episode of Hurd in the House. It is the chairman of the House Committee on Natural Resources, Bruce Westerman, who is the congressman from Arkansas's 4th Congressional District. He is an Arkansas native. He played football for the Arkansas Razorbacks. We might touch on that in a minute. He's an engineer and a forester. He has a master's degree in forestry from Yale University. He's actually the only forester in the United States House of Representatives. He's a member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and as I mentioned before, he is the chairman of the House Committee on Natural Resources. He is the husband to Sharon, also father of 4. And Chairman Westerman and I actually share a fondness for the same quote that's on the floor of the United States House of Representatives, which I will get to later. Chairman Bruce Westerman, welcome to Hurd in the House.
Great to be with you. Great to have Hurd in the House, and it's great to be in the House with Hurd. So I appreciate you inviting me on to your podcast and look forward to the discussion.
So let's start with something really important. Later this year, my alma mater, Notre Dame, is going to be playing football against your Arkansas Razorbacks. So with Arkansas playing Notre Dame this fall, what is your pitch for why the Razorbacks are going to win?
Because it's the Razorbacks. We're playing at home. And I don't know if Arkansas and Notre Dame have ever played. I think this may be the first.
This may be
first
the inaugural
matchup.
one.
Yeah. So I believe if our memory serves me, it's an earlier game in the year.
That's right. I think it's in September.
Yeah, so, a lot of times teams haven't hit their strides yet, so it ought to be an interesting matchup. You ought to come out to Arkansas and watch the game.
I would love to come and see the game. It's been
experience some SEC football.
Yeah, they do not mess around in the SEC, that's for sure. Now, I have to ask you, so what Arkansas treat are we going to bet on for this game? I just need to know what I'm looking forward to.
Well, what do they have treats in Colorado? What would or would you have to get the treat from Indiana?
Oh, that's true. Yeah. You know what? No, actually, I have already bet on Notre Dame football and I actually lost to Congressman Dave Taylor from Ohio. He has a nice bottle of Colorado bourbon because Notre Dame lost against Ohio State in the national championship last year. So usually, when I'm betting on Notre Dame, it's for Colorado products for my district. So I don't know if bourbon sounds good to you. We've got some great bourbon called peaches, some of the best peaches, and the whole Georgia doesn't have anything on our peaches. I'm not sure what I might bet on my end, but what would Arkansas be able to offer?
We got a wide variety of things. There's when you go down the food route, you could go barbecue and that route, or if you're talking about the spirits, we make something very unique in my hometown, which is Hot Springs National Park. We have wonderful thermal water there, and Hot Springs is known for its mineral water. If in the committee we drink Mountain Valley water that's bottled right there outside of Hot Springs. And Arkansas is also the largest rice producer in the United States. So
really?
we got a company that makes sake right there in Hot Springs.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that. Oh my goodness. Okay, well maybe sake will be the bet for that game. So that sounds good to me. So Arkansas's 4th Congressional District covers most of western and southwestern Arkansas. If someone had just a 3-day weekend to visit Arkansas's 4th Congressional District, what should they see?
Well, that would be tough. So in the northern part of the district is the nation's first wild and scenic river, the Buffalo National River. It's in the 4th District where it starts, and there's some amazing hiking trails up there. Hawksbill Crag is the most photographed place in the state. It's a rock outcropping that looks like a hawksbill, and then there's the Buffalo River. You could float that. You could make just a trip to that area. A lot of people don't realize there's a big elk herd in that part of the state. Arkansas used to be home to elk herds and buffalo, and a lot of people don't realize that elk and buffalo were that far south. Then you move a little further south to my hometown of Hot Springs, which is a national park. You can take a thermal bath in the bathhouse at the national park. There's beautiful lakes and streams there. Arkansas's got world-class mountain biking. I know from Colorado, you probably raised an eye at that, but there's actually a project to build a year-round mountain bike ski lift type system in Mena, Arkansas, which is in the western part of my district, over close to Oklahoma, and it'll be the only year-round ski lift style mountain bike system in the world.
Well, listen, you tell the folks there when they're talking about that ski lift system to consider Leitner Poma. It's one of the major American manufacturers of lifts and lift chairs, and it's done right in Colorado's 3rd Congressional District. Don't go with the Austrians. There's a company called Doppelmayr that also makes it, but stay American and tell the folks in your district to consider Leitner Poma ski lifts from Grand Junction, Colorado.
All right, I'll pass the word along.
So when you are, what's an Arkansas food or specialty that you miss most when you're in Washington? You mentioned barbecue. Is there something else that you miss?
It's just Southern food and Southern hospitality, and I mean it's like most places anymore. You can find any variety or genre of food that you're looking for. I was talking to some folks the other day. There was a feature article on a guy that moved to my hometown from. He grew up in New York. He started a pizza restaurant. Had never been in the restaurant business before, and Barstool Sports came by and gave him one of the highest ratings they've ever given on pizza. So,
wow.
And you mentioned I went to graduate school at Yale, and Yale is kind of the pizza center of the U.S. And this DeLuca's pizza is every bit as good as what you can get in New Haven.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Okay, DeLuca's pizza. So when we visit your district, we also have to have pizza at DeLuca's.
Yeah, and you probably don't think about going to Arkansas to have great pizza.
Pizza, and then we'll finish it with sake,
and some barbecue. Have some barbecue.
Some barbecue.
And then, if you're in the South, you just almost have to eat fried fish at some point.
Okay.
Catfish.
All right, we'll do that as well.
Yeah.
All right, we've got our 3-day trip to Arkansas's 4th Congressional District planned. So, Chairman Westerman, you are the only forester in Congress. You have a background in engineering. How did those lead you into public service?
I don't know that those led me into public service, but I think they've been beneficial in my public service. I often joke with folks that I have the 2 worst educational backgrounds to serve in Congress, because engineers are taught to think with logic and reason, and foresters look at long-term horizons. And as you know in your brief time in Congress, that those things aren't always appreciated.
That's a skill set that's not always employed when we're here on Capitol Hill, that's for sure. So was there a particular moment, either on a job site or in the field, when you realized you needed to run for office?
Not really. I think my public service kind of started organically. If we're talking about my educational background, I was fortunate after my first job out of college, I was able to move back to my hometown, and I got involved in a consulting engineering firm and had some ownership in the firm, was working many hours a week, loved my job, absolutely loved it. Got 4 kids. The youngest one was getting old enough to go to school, and actually started a school where I went all 12 years of my elementary and high school education. And the same school that one of my grandparents had went to and both my parents went to. So
oh, wow.
Very well knew everybody in the community, and there were some issues at the school, and some of the folks had encouraged me to run for the school board, and I did that. And I always say that's the hardest elected job I've ever had, because everybody you're dealing with are people you've known all your life. You have 0 staff. There's no pay. It's all volunteer.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with people's children, which there's nothing that people are more passionate about than their children. But I ran for the school board, and that's where I found out that being an engineer is not always that bad, because in public service, because schools do a lot of construction projects, and there just weren't a lot of people in the school district that had knowledge about how to do construction projects. So you find you can bring something to the table that's beneficial, even just in volunteering your expenses or your experience. But from there,
what kind of engineering specifically did you study as an undergrad?
I got my degree in biological and agricultural engineering.
Okay.
Which another thing you learn probably in most fields is that college prepares you how to work hard, especially engineering school teaches you how to solve problems. But until you get into a specific field and start working, you really don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
And when I would be hiring engineers, I would look for somebody that was a self-starter that could that had those problem-solving abilities and demonstrate that they could learn new things and solve problems. Because the education system just can't teach you everything you need to know to go do a specific job.
Right.
But anyhow, we had these very strict term limits in the state legislature in Arkansas, and the local state rep had term limited out. And I guess folks had seen the work I'd done on the school board, and they were like, "Why don't you run for the legislature?" And I had like zero interest in it.
You were like, "I thought you liked me."
Yeah. Well, then I thought, now I could get off of the school board. But so I, with children and job and all of that, I don't have time to do that. And they said, well, it's just a part-time job, which technically it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I went ahead and I signed up to run for the legislature, and this crazy thing happened. I had no primary opponent and no general election opponent.
Wow.
So I picked up a booklet from the Farm Bureau on how to run for the legislature, and I just all on my own set up a little campaign account, put some of my own money in it, never spent it.
Wow.
I was outside working in the yard the night I got elected to the state legislature, and almost didn't go to the new member orientation because I really didn't like the school board member orientation. It was kind of more indoctrination than orientation. Right. And my wife said something like, you should, since it's a legislature, you should probably at least go to the orientation. And it was kind of one of those moments like, what did I just get myself into?
Right.
And, because of those term limits, there was no real institutional knowledge in the legislature at the time. So the legislator with the most experience were going into their last term, and they had 4 years of experience in the legislature.
Wow.
So what that did, though, is it allowed me to, at the end of my first term, I became the minority leader. We were in the minority. And that was in March. And in November, we flipped the majority in the Arkansas General Assembly for the first time since Reconstruction. So it had been 138 years since Republicans had a majority in the Arkansas State House. And I ran unopposed my second term in the state legislature. So I'd never even been through a campaign.
Oh my goodness!
And I'm the majority leader of the General Assembly. But I thought I was going to do my third term, which was my final term, and then just go back and focus on life as an engineer and as a forester and raising my family. And my friend Tom Cotton, who used to be the 4th District congressman, decided to run for the Senate, which left this seat open. And again, people were coming to me saying, you should run for Congress. Well, I'd figured out by this point, do a little bit more research. and I knew that you weren't going to run for Congress unopposed. And, talked to my wife about it. This was 2013. It was the 2014 election.
Okay.
And, the next thing I know, I'm sitting in an office in D.C. again thinking, how did this happen?
Yeah. You never know where life is going to bring you. That's for sure.
Yeah. Going back to my football days at Arkansas, my coach used to tell us all the time that there's no such thing as luck. So what some people confuse for luck is where preparation meets opportunity. And, if I go back to my 18 or 20-year-old self, it would be hard to imagine like the path that my life has taken. And I would say if there's anything I've done, it's just try to be prepared and then to try to recognize opportunities when they come along.
That's great advice. So for all those young folks that may be out there listening to this, preparation, be prepared, and look for those opportunities where preparation meets opportunity. I think that's great career advice and life advice. Now, Chairman Westerman, Colorado's 3rd District has a large portion of federal lands in it. and you are a forester. I want to ask, how does being a forester change how you see federal land management compared to perhaps others in Congress? You mentioned before that you think of long time horizons, and your engineer background gives you a logical bent, and those two things aren't necessarily always consistent with how things work here. But what are some of the ways that it gives you a perspective that others don't have when it comes to these federal land management decisions?
Well, first off, it breaks my heart a lot of times to see what happens or what's happening on our public lands when I know there's a right way to do things, and that right way is not allowed to happen. And kind of if there is an advantage from having gone to forestry school, and this isn't some massive revelation, but you realize that, and you actually take a class called forest dynamics. Dynamics means motion and that things are changing. And the point of that class is to realize that forests are constantly changing. There's nothing static about a forest. And there's this kind of a worldview that we should leave nature alone and not do anything to it, and it'll take care of itself. Well, that is a management decision. If you say we're going to do nothing, you just made a management decision. So you can't get out of the conundrum by saying we're just going to do nothing, because that's just as valid, even though a bad management decision, just as valid of a management decision as if you were to say we're going to go clear cut this forest. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times when we've said we're going to do nothing in the past, it's like we're going to do nothing except we're going to put the fire out if it starts, mm-hmm. which is another management decision. And as a result, the biggest problem with our forests on public lands is they're overgrown, they're overstocked, and they're subject to catastrophic wildfire. Now, we know how to correct that, but it's almost like we've loved our trees to death. People love the trees so much they don't want to do anything, and the forest just continues to change and goes from a state of order to disorder, and the nature's way of correcting that is to wipe it out with a fire and start over. Right. But we know how to strategically intervene to create more resiliency in these forests, which creates better wildlife habitat, it creates more biodiversity, it
improves the watershed,
cleaner air and cleaner water, better recreational opportunities. There's really no downside to having a healthy forest, and it's something that should really cross partisan lines and should be one of the easiest things we do in Congress to apply these scientific research and knowledge that we have to make these forests healthy and resilient. There's no downside to doing that.
Now, Mr. Chairman, some folks hear the word conservation and they think it means stopping progress. Our motto for Republicans on the House Committee on Natural Resources is putting conservatives back into conservation. What does that mean to you as chairman of the Committee on Natural Resources?
Well, it means to me that as conservatives, we have to own the word conservation, which is actually derived from conservative. And Teddy Roosevelt was the father of conservation, and it talks about using what we've got but leaving it in good shape for future generations is a kind of a layman's way of putting it. But if you look deeper into the philosophy of conservatism, one definition that I really like is that a conservative is someone who believes in unchosen obligations. And it goes back to the idea that we have the blessings that we have today because of the good decisions that people made before us, and we want to conserve those ideas and principles for the future. Like when we look at our founding documents and this big experiment in self-governance, we have to go back to the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, those writings of our early founders, and a conservative is one that holds true to that. But a conservative is also one who believes they have an unchosen obligation to the future, and that we can't destroy what we've got today and sacrifice it for the future. And when you think of our natural world, that's exactly what conservation is. We use what we've got today, we try to improve it, and we try to leave it better than we found it for the future. And conservatives should not run from this idea of conservation. It's who we are.
Yep. Uh, Listeners should know, actually, before we started this podcast, we did a mic check, and I started reciting the Gettysburg Address just to do the mic check, and your congressmen, members of Arkansas's 4th Congressional District, started reciting the Declaration of Independence, and would have kept going if we hadn't had all the information we needed just off the top of his head memorized. So that's fantastic, and I think you're exactly right when you're talking about those connections with those founding principles and conservative and conservation. So was Teddy Roosevelt kind of the historical figure that you think most embodies that view of conservation and what we're trying to do in natural resources in the House of Representatives?
Yeah, I would say so. And there was one of his contemporaries, Gifford Pinchot, who the story goes that Roosevelt laid out maps of the West on the floor of the Oval Office, and he and Pinchot got down on the floor with pencils and started sketching out public lands. That was, one of the first mapping activities of how the federal lands in the West were set aside. And Pinchot also founded the Yale School of Forestry.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did that end up at Yale? So I think most people wouldn't think of Yale as having a school of forestry, but how did that happen?
Well, and it's really the oldest forestry school in the United States. And Pinchot had to go to Europe to study forestry. And of course, you got the country expanding west, all the demands for timber and everything. And there were no real educated foresters in the U.S. So Pinchot, who was, I think he did Yale undergrad, lived in New Haven, Connecticut. He came back, and his family started the forestry program at Yale.
Wow.
And then he was the first chief of the Forest Service, and obviously good friends with Teddy Roosevelt.
I think his desk, I was talking with Tom Schultz, the Forest Service head now, and I think his desk now is Gifford Pinchot's desk that he originally had when he was at the Forest Service. So there's a great history there going back to Teddy Roosevelt and Gifford Pinchot that I think you're right is worthy of recognizing and emulating in these modern times.
I had an opportunity to speak at the American Forestry Congress it was yesterday actually, and there's a big book. It's the Proceedings of the First American Forestry Congress, and it happened in 1905, and the keynote speaker was Teddy Roosevelt, and Gifford Pinchot spoke at it. And then you look down the list, and if you care about forest history, it was like the who's who of forestry professionals. But also, the railroads were expanding west. We were producing about 10 times more cross ties per year than we are now, like over 100 million cross ties per year, because there was so much railroad. But all the railroad folks were at the First American Forestry Congress. There was this young entrepreneur there named Fred Weyerhaeuser.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So like you just read the list of attendees, and you're like, man, it would have been really cool to have been part of this meeting, and to actually have the president come and make an address at the First American Forestry Congress. But I think that was 1905. There had been a lot of timber just ravaged in our country by 1905,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really the point when forest conservation came into play.
Yeah. Now, my district in Colorado's 3rd district, as I mentioned before, has a large percentage of federal land, including land managed by the BLM, as well as 7 national forests managed by the U.S. Forest Service. More than half the land in some western counties is federally managed. What's your view on how much control Washington should have over lands where local communities live and work and raise families?
Well, it is public land. It's public land owned by the federal government. Going back to the motto of our committee, creating access through conservation, putting conservatives back into conservation. We need to make sure that these lands have access, but we also need to make sure that these lands are managed properly, and the federal government has failed to do that. And it's not always because of the there are not well-meaning people in the Forest Service or the BLM. It's because their hands, in many cases, are tied by legislation that allows frivolous lawsuits and that allows people to sue and stop management programs. And again, that is a management action. If you go back, we're not going to do anything. We just made a management decision, but the no action decision is never analyzed in the courts. So we have created a lot of programs to allow states to be more active in managing the federal lands. One's called the Good Neighbor Authority. Not only allows states but also tribes to take part in doing forest management and other kinds of management on federal lands, which I think is a great program that's working well in many different states. And we need to empower state agencies to do more of that kind of conservation work so that things can actually happen on the ground. And we also need to fix the federal laws so that these activities can take place and not always get held up with some injunction in a court.
So one of the pieces of legislation, actually, in my first speech from the floor of the House of Representatives was in support of the Fix Our Forest Act, which I know you champion, a bipartisan piece of legislation. Tell us a little bit about that, and why is that legislation important to Arkansas's 4th Congressional District, but also Colorado's 3rd Congressional District?
Well, the legislation is important because it allows management on our federal lands. And this really started, it's been happening since the 90s. And we've been seeing the frequency and intensity of our forest fires increase every year. And it culminated early this year with those horrific fires in Los Angeles. Now, we had passed the Fix Our Forest Act last fall, bipartisanly out of the House, but it never went any place in the Senate. As you came into this Congress and those fires were happening, we pulled the bill back up. It was the first regular order bill that we passed out of this Congress. And as you saw, it got tremendous bipartisan support, and it's a really robust piece of legislation. It has bipartisan sponsors in the Senate, and hopefully that's going to get on President Trump's desk. But to give you a little bit of history about that, several years ago, a friend of mine that does a lot of work in giant sequoias and redwoods contacted me and said, I've been out in Kings Canyon, and he said, this place is a tinderbox. He said, we're going to lose giant sequoias to fire. And when I was in forestry school, if there's one tree that you would think fire cannot touch this tree, is a giant sequoia. Some of them have bark that's 2 feet thick that acts as an insulation. They're massive trees. And some of them are over 3,000 years old, and they've withstood all kinds of fire. But because of our mismanagement out there, and mismanagement in the fact that we would put out every fire that came along, these researchers went in and figured out that for millennia, these sequoia groves were experiencing about 30 to 35 fires per century. So every 3 years or so, you're going to have a fire go through, and it cleans out the underbrush. Well, mid-1800s, we started putting out all the fires that started. And you had the specifically white fir trees that are shade-tolerant trees that grow really slow in the understory, but you give them 100, 120 years, and these things are 100 feet tall, mm-hmm. and the tops of them are right up in the lower crowns of the giant sequoias. Well, now the fire comes through, this white fir creates ladder fuel. The fire runs right up the white fir tree and gets in the crown of the giant sequoias. And we saw 20% of the giant sequoias on the planet, which they all grow in the Sierra Nevadas in California on the western slopes, usually above about 4,500 feet of elevation. But we saw 20% of them, the most iconic tree in the world, wiped out in 2 years because of catastrophic wildfire. And I was able to visit with some Democrat colleagues from California, Scott Peters particularly, and just show them the research and the science. And we did a field trip out there, and you could stand in the forest and you could see the scorched white fir remnants right next to the scorched giant sequoia, and for as far as you could see was a dead giant sequoia forest. and it really got people's attention. And we worked on bipartisan legislation called the Save Our Sequoias Act. We had environmental groups that would never before really consider any kind of forest management come out with letters of support. And from that, we put together the Fix Our Forest Act, which would apply not just to the sequoia groves in California, but really all across the country.
And what's the most important thing that it fixes or addresses about how the federal government manages public lands? What does Fix Our Forest do? Just summarize it in a 15 or 20-second nutshell.
It streamlines the permitting process so that the work can actually happen. The broken laws that we've got now, you could to do management on federal lands, you have to go through this whole NEPA analysis, which can take years to do it. Then you can get what's called a record of decision that says you can go start the work, and then somebody has 6 years that they can file a lawsuit to stop the work through an injunction, and everything just gets bogged down in morass and nothing ever happens. What it does is it puts common sense back into the permitting process. You still have to go through that, but it creates a timeline and a shot clock and ways to make it happen more quickly so that you can react to the looming catastrophes that are out there. And it also creates emergency authorizations so that the professionals in the Forest Service and the BLM can go in and say, yeah, this needs immediate action, and they can take action.
Okay, we are getting close to the end of time here, so I'm going to jump into a lightning round and ask you a couple other questions. First, name Arkansas's most underrated natural site, somewhere that perhaps even locals forget to appreciate.
Well, we've got the tallest waterfall between Appalachia and the Rocky Mountains. It's called Hemden Hollow, and it's up on the Buffalo National River. You can take a very strenuous hike down to it and back out, or you can float the river and get off at the appropriate spot and walk about a half mile and see the waterfall at Hemden Hollow. But there's so many treasures. Arkansas is called the natural state, and I've yet to talk to anybody that didn't really know much about Arkansas that came there that didn't say, wow, I never knew it was so beautiful, and I never knew you had so much stuff here. But you could spend a lot of time in Arkansas just seeing the natural beauty.
You need more than a long weekend for sure.
Right.
Name a book currently on your nightstand.
Book currently on my nightstand is it was a book that a friend gave me looking at the kind of the biblical case around what's going on in the Middle East.
Oh.
That's the one that's currently on my nightstand.
Do you have a favorite book?
I've got a lot of favorite books. We were just talking earlier about the first American Forestry Conference or Congress. They summarize that in almost a 500-page book, and I'm probably the only nerd that's ever read the whole the whole book. But I love things associated with history, and especially history around stuff that I'm interested in, like forestry and conservation.
Caffeinated beverage that you enjoy to start the day?
Coffee.
Coffee.
With just coffee.
Just coffee.
No cream, sugar, anything.
No cream, no sugar.
Don't mess it up.
Don't. Like my grandmother. If you could invite any historical figure to hunt or fish with, who would it be?
Oh, my goodness. I got asked this question one time, and it was a little bit different form, and my answer was Teddy Roosevelt and Gifford Pinchot.
Okay. That makes sense, given what your interests are and what you're doing. When you started in Congress, did you want to become chairman of the House Committee on Natural Resources, or was that something that developed later?
It developed later. So when I started in Congress, you've just been through this. You get elected and you fill out a form. What committees do you want to be on? And you talk to leadership about it. I came in and I said I wanted to be on energy and commerce. And they said, well, what's your second choice? Because that's not going to happen. And I was like, trying to make my case for energy and commerce. And they're like, "Don't you have a forestry background?" I go, "Yeah, I'm an engineer and a forester." They said, "Well, you should be on natural resources." And I got on natural resources and loved it. And I'm so thankful that I didn't get my wish to be on energy and commerce, because there's so many neat things to work on the natural resources committee. And then just by working hard on the committee and uh, taking an interest in it, I got picked to be the chairman of the committee.
Well, it's great to have you as chairman. And actually, my first piece of legislation that was passed out of the House went through the House Natural Resources Committee, the Wetlands Conservation and Access Improvement Act, and that just passed out on Monday. So, and that came through Natural Resources, which
Well,
is
we've have a track record of usually getting more bills signed into law than any other committee in Congress, and we had a stellar year last year, the work that we did in the committee. But I will say, kudos to you for coming in as a freshman and chairing a subcommittee on the Natural Resources Committee. You're doing a great job at that, and it's my job to pick who the subcommittee chairs are going to be. And when I first met you, I thought this guy's got a lot of potential, and you've exceeded expectations. So thank you for your work as the chairman of the subcommittee on Indian and Insular Affairs.
It's an honor, and I'm thrilled to do it, and I love it. We had a great hearing just yesterday, and I'm getting more comfortable in the chair with the gavel and working with colleagues on both sides of the aisle. And there are a lot of issues that I think most people back home, if you just watch the news, it looks like we're always at each other's throats on things. But, if you're here in D.C., you see there are a lot of issues where folks can agree across the aisle, whether it's forestry, whether it's tribal issues, and many others. And so that's been a great experience for me in leading that subcommittee and working to help folks in Indian country and in our insular territories. It's been fantastic.
The hearing yesterday was on Puerto Rico and the Financial Oversight Management Board that was put in place by a law that we passed 10 years ago.
Promesa.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was good. There's still a lot of progress that's being made, but work to be done that remains. So what's the best advice you've ever received from a coach or mentor?
Oh, wow. I received so much good advice from my coaches. It's just that you realize this serving in Congress, that it's a team sport. I would hope that everybody that comes to Congress marched in the band, played on a team, or did something where they realize that life's not centered around themselves, and that when everybody works together, that it's better for everyone. But my coach, that I've already used his quote about there's no such thing as luck, it's where preparation meets opportunity. That had an impact on me.
That's a great piece of advice.
There's another famous football coach named Bear Bryant that was from Fordyce, Arkansas, which is in my district, so we kind of claim him too, even though he was at Alabama, obviously. But he got asked about being lucky one time, and he said he found that the harder he worked, the luckier he got.
Yeah, that's right. I love it. Name a Democratic colleague that you respect in particular.
There's several of them that I've got a lot of respect for. We've talked about Scott Peters, who was the co-sponsor of the Fix Our Forest Act, and we worked together on the Save Our Sequoias Act. Jimmy Panetta is a good friend who he and I are the co-chairs of the Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus, and have just always gotten along well. We have a gym that a lot of us go to in the morning, and Josh Gottheimer, a Democrat from New Jersey, is in our workout group along with Seth Moulton. And the public sees the high profile fighting on cable news and the internet, but I tell people all the time that most bills that we pass are passed on suspension, which means it takes a 2/3 vote. And there's still a lot more that we agree on than we disagree on.
Yep.
But those things we disagree on, there's some pretty heated disagreements.
Yep, that's for sure. What's a policy issue you'd like to work on but haven't had the bandwidth for yet?
We're working on permitting reform, but I hesitate to say we don't have the bandwidth on it, because I think there's enough bipartisan interest in fixing our broken permitting laws so that we can number one, fulfill the the intent of the laws when they're put in place to protect the environment, to have clean air and clean water, but to do it in a way where we can still have economic growth and development. There's this idea that a strong economy and a healthy environment are mutually exclusive, but I'd argue that they go hand in hand. The better you, the stronger economy you have, and the more resources you're able to put into conservation, you're going to see better environmental outcomes plus a stronger economy. And to accomplish that, we desperately need to do permitting reform. There's some work I would love to do on habitat restoration that I think we've got some really good ideas on that. Talk about these federal lands that are so unmanaged and underutilized. If we would just try to get them back to the condition they were in when Europeans first found them, we would see massive increases in wildlife and biodiversity. And as a person who likes to hunt and likes to fish, because when you have a healthy forest, you're creating healthy streams and rivers and fisheries, it would make a huge difference now and going into the future.
NFL or college football?
Oh, college football.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And I think I know the answer to this. What teams do you root for? Razorbacks, of course.
What other team is there?
Okay. Favorite band?
The Razorback Marching Band? No, I'm just kidding. My favorite band, probably the Eagles.
The Eagles. Okay, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
All right. Now, on the floor, we're going to wrap up with one last thing. And this made a great impression on me the very first time we were in House Natural Resources, and you had kind of a welcome for all of the committee members. You mentioned a quote that had also stood out to me that's from a plaque that is above the speaker's rostrum, kind of in the gallery on the House floor, and it's a quote from former Congressman Daniel Webster, and at least at the time you had the quote memorized, so I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Yeah.
What is that quote, do you remember, and why is it important to you?
Let me give a little bit of background on the quote. It was Daniel Webster, and we just passed the 200th year anniversary of him making that statement. It was on June the 17th, 1825. He was at the dedication of the Bunker Hill Monument commemorating the Battle of Bunker Hill, which was one of the three battles that was fought before the Revolutionary War, before the Declaration of Independence, and we were officially in the war. So it's the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Bunker Hill. They're dedicating this monument. You've got Daniel Webster, who is one of the greatest orators in the history of our country, giving the keynote address. You got Marquis de Lafayette, the general from France, who helped us win the Revolutionary War. He's in attendance. There are 120 Revolutionary War veterans at the ceremony and over 1,000 people. So Daniel Webster gives this long speech, and right at the end, in summarizing his speech, he says these words that are carved in marble right above the speaker's rostrum. And they're really I think a challenge to members of the House, but I think they're also a challenge to our country. And what first caught my eye about it was the first line that says, "Let us develop the resources of our land." And as the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee, I think that's pretty cool that the one quote that's in the House chamber starts off saying, "Let us develop the resources of our land, comma, call forth its powers, build up its institutions, promote all its great interest, and see whether or not we too, in our day and generation, may do something worthy to be remembered." So what a great challenge.
It's such a great quote.
As we sit in that chamber, what are we going to do in our day and generation that's worthy to be remembered, especially when you think about who Webster was speaking to that day. 120 Revolutionary War veterans on the 50th anniversary of that battle. And it goes back to this idea of conservatism. They were looking at what had been done in the past in this amazing 50 years, unlike anything that had ever been seen in history. but he was looking to the future as well with this challenge to all of us to see what we can do that's worthy to be remembered in our day and generation.
My guest today has been House Natural Resources Chairman Bruce Westerman. Thank you, Bruce, for joining Hurd in the House.
Great to be in the house with Hurd.
Thank
Jeff.
you, listeners, for tuning in. For more information about today's episode or to sign up for updates from my office, go to hurd.house.gov. That's HURD.house.gov, or visit my YouTube channel at Rep. Jeff Hurd. Thank you so much, and until next time, you heard it here first.